Good afternoon, everyone. This is Service Year Alliance, and welcome to our webinar on Turn Service into Skills for Corps Member Resumes. We are recording this webinar, and we will send it out to everyone afterwards in a debrief with also the resources that we go over today. I'm lucky to be joined today by some great people who are going to talk to you. The first is Ben Duda, Executive Director of AmeriCorps Alums. One of the reasons why we're doing this webinar is he has created this kind of summer into fall, a great tool to help alumni kind of place their skills into resumes and what are those classic things that you need to do with resumes. We're going to really go through that today along with some of those skills. We're also joined by Rabia Budwani and Jenya Cole, who are Service Year alums, Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, and they're going to talk about their own personal experience, the skills that they learned, how they turned them into resume and job skills, and we'll do that after Ben goes through his slides. I'm Brian Hall, the Associate Director of Organizational Learning at Service Year. You'll probably get used to my voice opening and closing all our webinars at Service Year. And I'm also going to be opening and facilitating in between some of the conversations for today's webinar. We'll also have Callie Cornacchia, who's the Manager of Career and Pathway at Service Year, and she's also going to be helping me and chiming in. All of us are really knowledgeable on this topic area, and so you might hear us kind of chiming in on each other's slides, which is awesome. And so hopefully people will find this beneficial. Today's audience, really, we have a mix. So there's Corps members on the line. There are also host orgs on the line. And really, we find this is valuable for both sides. Host orgs should understand how to help their Corps members turn all of their experiences into actionable things when they leave. And it's also great for Corps members to know what kind of skills that they can tout on their resume and utilize as well. Before we go into our today's subject, for those of you who do not know who we are at Service Year Alliance and just got this link to somebody else to come to today's webinar, we're a nonprofit organization working to make your service a common expectation and opportunity for all Americans. And really, we're working across many different ways and many different stakeholders, and we're really trying to help fill the gaps of the work that is already being done by a multitude of stakeholders. Ben on the line is one of those working at AmeriCorps Alums. There's a lot of work that he does. What are things that we can help or promote, in this case, help promote? And also just CNCS, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps local and state and national. And so all of this is really, we're trying to help fill in the gaps and make service a common expectation opportunity, which everybody and all the stakeholders agree to. So really today we're here to talk about resume skills and resume, how to transfer those skills into actionable resume builder and interview skills. And so really wanted to start with kind of the agreed upon areas where national service, we get unique skills in doing national service, and host orgs, present these to their Corps members as well. And really it comes down to kind of a couple buckets, and we're going to go through how AmeriCorps Alums talks about it, how we kind of have been talking about it Service Year, and really where all this is generated from, which are the 21st century skills. But here you kind of see a rundown of things that we collectively, as national service alumni, build or receive as we're in our national service competencies. And so the first I just wanted to go on is how AmeriCorps Alums talks about it, and I'm hoping that Ben can review some of the skills that they see as the top 5.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thanks, everyone. It's really great to be here. I think the core of this conversation is really about the idea that in a service year, in an AmeriCorps experience, Corps members and their host organizations are really leanly organized and critically focused on achieving their mission. And so what that often means is that core members receive invaluable training and experience being able to increase capacity, increase impact, and serve that mission, whether it's building houses, increasing attendance performance of third graders, supporting underserved communities or homeless communities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we know and what we found out, I think, particularly in the end of the aughts that coincided with some funding changes from CNCS and the larger economic situation, is that these nonprofit organizations aren't necessarily well positioned to support individuals in their life after AmeriCorps, in their life after service. And so AmeriCorps Alums has been doing lots of outreach, surveying, compilation, conversation with employers, with programs, with core members, with older alumni, to really try and better understand what is that special component that makes an AmeriCorps alum, that makes a service year alum. And so what we've done in this document on the right is really the distillation of that concept. Really comes from employers, really comes from those employers and those companies that have said, you know, we want to participate in the AmeriCorps Alums Jobs Board. We want to participate in your virtual career fairs. We're part of Employers of National Service, which was an initiative, bipartisan, multi-sector approach to kind of hiring Peace Corps alumni and AmeriCorps alumni, because we know that service transfers important skills. And I think we'll touch on this later, but this is really talking about what used to be called soft skills, which now many call 21st century skills or employability skills. These are those other things that you get from service. And so, again, this is a handout that we use, we share with core members and alumni, as well as other employers and host sites, and think it's a helpful tool. But ideas like initiative, interpersonal and intercultural communication, adaptability, collaboration, accountability. For a host site, these are things that you can use as selling points. These are some things that your members are going to get from their service experience. For currently serving members and alumni, these are ideas that need to be reflected in your resume, in your conversation, in a screening interview, in an informational interview, in a final round interview. You need to be able to talk about not just managing 12 volunteers, which increased the time that it took for a Habitat for Humanity house to be built. That was the skill. You learned how to hang drywall. You learned how to do baseboards. But in order to actually effect that change, you were learning all of these other important things that are transferable in nearly every sector, every type of workplace. If you went on monster.com and picked a job type, that job requires these skills. And so to be able to follow in that pathway and know that that's the experience that you're getting from your service is critical, is valuable, and you know, frankly, we haven't done as good of a job as we should as a community in accentuating and talking about that, because you know, we know anecdotally, you can name a company and I can tell you there's an AmeriCorps alum working at that organization, but we haven't yet mastered the case that says AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, National Service is this important critical step from you know, secondary education, undergrad education to success in the workplace. And so this is part of the work that we're doing and part of the reason why we're so excited to be a part of today's webinar.
Great, thank you, Ben. And those are all amazing points, and really, you know, us trying to help the field and AmeriCorps alums with this top 5 skills of showing, you know, host orgs and core members, and thank you for tying the piece to Employers of National Service, that these are the skills that you can expect when a core member shows up for an interview, and we want these to be represented on resumes as well. Another thing that is also tangential with some of the work being done at AmeriCorps alums is also a pilot called Badging being done by Learning.org in Service Year. And really here are similar skills that Ben's top 5 list is, but also tweaked just a little bit, and so I wanted Callie to maybe go over where this is and how you see core members utilizing this.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great, okay. Hi everyone, again, this is Callie, Brian, and Ben. Thank you so much for the intro and for kicking us off. So I am the manager of Career and Education Pathways at Service Year Alliance, and I think my job title pretty much speaks for itself. What I do on the day-to-day is think about what are the post-service pathways for young people once they're done with their core year. So whether they're going to higher education or other credentialing or education opportunities after service, or whether they're going straight to job opportunities or careers, we're trying to better pave those pathways so that service year members can get there easier, that there's clear roads ahead of them and opportunities. So piggybacking off a lot of what Ben said about skills, we know that there's a lot of different hard skills that core members are getting that are really dependent on their service year, whether they're learning how to create curriculums because they're being a supporter in the education system, or if they're getting chainsaw or fire certifications because they're out in the wilderness. There are certain skills that are really important and specific to that core year. But what we're finding that employers are really seeing as valuable are those 21st century skills that are sort of across any sort of service year. So whether you're in these different service opportunities, these are the skills that seem to resonate and are most universal to all service years. So in front of you here, you can see 6 of the skills that we've pulled out. So they're maybe slightly different in words than what you saw from the previous slide on the AmeriCorps Alum skill or the slide before that, but they should still fall into those same big buckets of skills that employers are seeing as the most valuable for when they're looking at hiring. So what we're doing at Service Year is we're trying to figure out ways that we can translate these 21st century skills into actual evidence that a young person finishing their service year can take to show an employer or show a prospective education opportunity. So what digital badging does, it's this new sort of wave of education that basically takes learning that happens outside of a classroom and creates ways for digital evidence to be made so that you can digitally share things that you're doing in other spaces. So for example, we have here 6 badges that we've created with lrng.org that is a badging service. And Service Year Alliance has pulled out what we've seen as the most important universal skills, again, as a service year. So you can see cultural competency, civic engagement, workplace planning, personal awareness, communication, and teamwork and collaboration. So for our badging pilot, we're still pretty new at this, but we're having current core members go through these digital badges. So what they do is these badges each have a series of activities, and those activities ask core members to reflect on the work that they're doing during service and then upload either documents, photos, videos on themselves, reflecting on the skills that they're getting for those activities. So what we hope is that by the end of a young person doing these badges, that since they've had a chance to reflect on the skills that they're gaining and how those activities translate to these skills, that when they go for a job interview or when they're applying for college, they'll have these examples ready and they're using the words that best resonate with employers and with higher ed institutions. So far we've seen a lot of success in that the young people that have tested the badges out who are doing a service year really appreciated the chance to reflect. As a service year alum myself, I know that it can get really busy and overwhelming sometimes, and you can't always sit back to think about how helping a kid with their math homework is going to translate to a job in the future. So what our badges do, try to give that space so core members can reflect. So as a plug, if any service year host organizations are interested in participating, or if there are any currently serving service members who are interested as well, talk to your supervisors. We would love to have more people participate. You can see what the badges are if you go to the URL, lrng.org/serviceyear, but in order to actually fill them out and use them, you have to sign up through me. So we, again, would love more people to participate and are really excited about the possibilities here of translating those service into a digital way that a young person can have beyond their service year.
Great, thank you, Kelly. And looking at both what Callie just reviewed and also going back a slide to Ben, you know, a lot of the terminology is slightly different, but it is at its core the same thing. So these kind of 21st century skills that we both Callie and Ben have mentioned, I have mentioned, and here is a full list of what those kind of literacies, competencies, and qualities are if you've never seen when people say 21st century skills. And all these skills, as you can see, is the backbone of how AmeriCorps alum is speaking about things, how the badging system is speaking about things. Really at the heart of these identities and literacies, competencies, and qualities that we are saying national service members when their alums receive. So it really is a great way as host orgs to start looking at these and say, are my core members receiving, you know, maybe 3 of these, and then I should, throughout their service, help them document what that means going into them kind of preparing for the next step of their life. Same with core members, you know, really identifying as you go along the skills that you are receiving. Because of all of these, we may not all receive them in one site or one placement, but really you want to tailor it to what you're kind of receiving in your placement and sites. So really before we kind of go on to how do we take these skills and translate it technically into a resume, we do have these existing resources that really, you know, there is much more on AmeriCorps alums website. There's professional development things. There's also other webinars similarly helping translate these things. And so I want to give these URLs. They'll also be in the follow-up email and debrief. Peace Corps Association also does a great job at a similar thing. Here's the badging information. And also on our website, just because we are working with AmeriCorps alums or Peace Corps Association and such, that we've started a website that we can funnel people to these websites as well. So really trying to get host orgs to these resources to help their core members when it's onboarding, concurrent, kind of onboarding the core members, current kind of professional development, and then offboarding, and also places for core members to go so that you can find the relevant information no matter where you start. So with that, you know, you document your skills and you really have an idea of what they are, but how do you translate that into a resume? And so really I'm super excited when I saw this document that Ben created this summer, really stepping through kind of what does it take technically to put a resume together, and some of the steps specifically within AmeriCorps, I would say national service lens to things. And really this document, and you will receive it as part of the debrief to this webinar as well, or what are the essentials, what are the best practices, and you can find this resource on the AmeriCorps alum. But with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ben to review.
Great, and I apologize, Callie. Remind me I didn't introduce myself at the top. So this is Ben Duda, Executive Director of AmeriCorps alums. I'm an AmeriCorps alum myself. I served in the NCCC and in a state national program in Boston called Citizen Schools that works with after-school programs for middle schoolers. So, you know, the genesis of this tool was really about when we did our survey work and found out that core members were increasingly feeling like they were unsupported for life after AmeriCorps, didn't know where to start, didn't know where to look. Sites didn't feel like they had the resources or time necessarily. In-service dollars as well as hours have been cut back in lieu of making sure there was more time in the field, more time for impact from the service work. So those combination of factors really motivated us to put out what still is our most popular, most widely viewed webinar, which is how to put AmeriCorps on your resume. We've done it a couple different times, but the core challenge is always the same. How do you talk about your service in an interview, on a piece of paper, in an elevator? And so how to put AmeriCorps on your resume is just the question that folks need, feel like they need the most support and resources for. What we found is there's certainly so much more we could do with that. And so this tool, I think, serves two distinct audiences, which I'm excited are both reflected here. One, program managers. You should be able to access this document and print out copies or send your members to it, and either through a short guided instruction or as a leave behind or as a deeper dive, a walkthrough, you could literally envision a whole host of ways that this document would make it much easier for your programs, for your sites, to talk about AmeriCorps on the resume for your members. Site directors have said, we have an hour-long session, but what's not super exciting is putting a YouTube video on a big screen, pressing play, and hoping that people pay attention for the full hour. So we thought that a document that was a little interactive might help to solve that challenge for sites. Similarly, we know for members, some of you take the public transportation to and from your site every day. Some of you are in the backcountry. Some of you are in a 12-passenger van driving across the country to different service locations. Watching a webinar, having access to a laptop, having access to reliable internet to do streaming. Some of these things just might not be there, so we wanted to make an offline tool that could serve as both a companion to our webinar and a standalone document. And so, without going through slide by slide, detail by detail, I just wanted to kind of introduce broadly the concept of this tool so that folks understood the many ways that it can be useful. So essentially what we've done is we've created a archetype, right? Jane graduated from undergrad, did a couple years in an after-school program, probably a part-time role, probably also had another part-time job during that time, and then decided to enroll in AmeriCorps at After School Superstars in Philly in August of 2016. She has some recent experience, so we wanted to make sure from the formatting to the length to the layout that we gave individuals a really clear suggested starting point. And Brian has some resources further on about other resources that you can use. There's a lot out there. We wanted to kind of just put a flag in the ground and present one way to think about this. So I think some of the things from how to signal your interest, right? So Jane put in the headline, relocating to Denver, fall 2017. From a length perspective, kept her information to one page. There are some competencies at the top, and so on and so forth. So you'll see what we did is we've got, and Brian has done kind of, page one stays on the right as we go through these slides, and then page two, when you would turn the page over, shows kind of some basic formatting guidelines, some real tips to keep in mind, and then walks through. You'll see the AmeriCorps alum symbol is kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the document, and each of those numbers corresponds to guidance. And so if you go back a slide, you'll see education has the number 2, and then down here we have number 2, right? So do not list your high school if you graduated college. Do list your high school if you haven't attended college. So just some of those things that sometimes are the questions that get us stuck. We tried to answer those. It is not exhaustive, right? It's 4 pages. It was meant to be 4 pages and not 14 or 24 or 44. So there's going to be some things that you'll want to do. If you're a member and you use this tool, it's probably not the complete answer. You might still ask your site supervisor. You might ask someone at your college career services location. You might do a swap with someone else at your site and just say, I updated my resume. Want to take a look? And that person can reciprocate. You want to do a couple checks, but this is hopefully going to serve as a tool. Similar for sites, this tool is going to help you answer some basic questions with some kind of best practices recommendations. And what I failed to mention so far is that this was developed in partnership with an alum who has her own consulting firm called Career Happiness Coaching. She's got over 20 years experience in the field, works in higher education in the space full time, as well as has taken kind of a very diverse array of training in psychology, finding happiness in career, and other areas to really help round out the information. This is not exhaustive. This is not how to beat the system or how to game the system. This is not a 100% guarantee that you're going to get every job you're applying to. This is none of those promises. This is really just saying putting service on a resume is hard. AmeriCorps Alums wants to help you make it easier. So then we've got professional experiences, and what we've done in professional experiences in particular is we've presented a couple different ways to think about it. So you'll see here, and this is always a challenge, but I think what you'll see consistently is you'll see action words and numbers, and that's the thing that is always critical. So if you're serving at a site right now, you want to be talking to your site supervisor about the impact that your program is having, the impact that your classroom is having, your site is having. If attendance has gone up 20%, you cannot leave your year without making sure you know how much attendance went up. Because that information is your contribution that goes in your resume and your talking points. Jane talks about how much money was raised individually as part of the group, and so kind of pulls out some highlights. If we go to the next slide, there's a little bit different format, which is called functional chronological, and so it's just saying, there's two ways that you can present your professional experience. One of the core questions this answers is AmeriCorps professional experience or is it volunteer experience? It's professional. For many of you, it's a full-time commitment. It needs to be in that space. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, make sure you put AmeriCorps by name, if you're serving in AmeriCorps, in the description somewhere. Even if you're a city year, Comcast team leader, make sure you say AmeriCorps, because what AmeriCorps does is serve as the uniting branding. And I know that this is service years kind of goal over time to serve similarly, to be the signal that says to me, I did NCCC in citizen schools. I've never heard of after school superstars. But as soon as I get to line 2 and I see AmeriCorps member, I say, I was an AmeriCorps member. We've hired AmeriCorps members before. I know what this means. I know how to consider this candidate differently. If you leave it out, the difference between after-school superstars and Boys and Girls Club could be really insignificant, but the actual details of the commitment and of the experience are very different. And so AmeriCorps is an important signal for your resume. It's also an important signal for your LinkedIn profile. Keep AmeriCorps experience, keep your service experience in your professional experience section, not in volunteering. Use those keywords like Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, as well as the host site name, the technical title, because you want to create commonalities so that people who are not directly associated with your program but are 1 or 2 steps removed from it have a way to relate back to it. And AmeriCorps National Service, Service Year, Peace Corps, Youth Build, Conservation Corps, those are going to be the type of umbrella phrases that are going to create those connections. You'll see here we also highlight in icon 4 additional sections suggested. Here it's community leadership, so really identifying community leadership and volunteer experience in a separate section, especially if it's interesting, especially if it's long-term, especially if you have a leadership role. If you went on an alternative spring break and you went camping for a week, that's cool. That might go under kind of this in the skill set section under other interests. But because Jane was a student leader, that has responsibility and can be called out and can help to complement the professional experience. Finally, the last section there is skills, technology. Don't say Microsoft proficient. Microsoft's been around for a long time. Everybody's had to use Word. But if you have had to use Excel, PowerPoint, if you've had to run a social media account, if you've had to use Razor's Edge, Salesforce, any other kind of database, any accounting software, using those brand names there in the skills section helps to pull it out. And then I think you can also consider using, listing other things. One of the things I've included on my resume for a while was Chainsaw Certified. Because that was a skill that I acquired in NCCC. It's interesting. It makes a great conversation piece. I've had a couple of great interviews where the reviewer would get to that and say, Chainsaw Certified, what's that about? And that allowed me to have a conversation about being on the Sawyer team and what that responsibility meant to being a part of my other team, what additional impact I had, what additional challenges as we had to do the training one winter in Virginia and learn how to run chainsaws in a pretty cold storm, show resilience. So that helps me kind of tie back into other talking points in my interview. But skills and interest, if your interest is going to Bonnaroo, sure, that might be an interest, but that might not make it to your resume. So, you kind of have to have some discretion there. Again, there are no hard and fast rules. What we're hoping to do is just really add to the literature, make it easier for members and sites to navigate what we know is a challenging issue, and provide a tool that you can use and use for free, online or offline, like all of our resources at Alum. So we'd be glad to take any questions. I'll check out the chat and the Q&A to see if I've missed anything, and would love if the other presenters had kind of any follow-up they wanted to add on what I've omitted.
Great, thank you, Ben. And I love the way that you're framing this. Is that this is a off-the-shelf guide that you guys created, and it's not exhaustive. But when looking through it and in this debrief, when you see the link to the document and can spend some time with it, you guys really have hit all the high notes when it comes to kind of the standards that you should be thinking. Anybody, whether you're a core alum or just somebody off the street looking to update your resume, these are all really great key things. And I want to second what Ben said about just making sure that language about AmeriCorps member or Peace Corps member, I'm a returned Peace Corps alumni, and everybody on this call today, just to make it explicit because I have all done a service. So making those things explicit on your professional experience is really key to tying into the brand and being able to utilize that when you're going for your next kind of adventure, whether that's education or for a job. So please, if you have any questions, type them in the chat or Q&A. We're going to keep going, but we will have some time at the end to answer any questions. So really, we've gone from here's some of the top skills that National Service receive across the board, and maybe for your site or your experience, or for your host or ones that you have that are top quality, may be a little bit different from site to site or program to program, but we've now going through kind of a resource to help you place to a resume and also how you can do the standards of a resume. We also want to just make sure that you understand, to do research about the industry that you're going into. A resume can look different if you're going for nonprofit, if you're going for for-profit. For government, a lot of times it's CV, so your full experience, not just the one sheet. And definitely different industries ask for different things. Here you can see we're just giving an example of Canva.com, has kind of out-of-the-box templates that you can choose. Let's say you want a corporate resume. There's some ideas here for corporate resume, but really the idea around templates and these types of things is to take those experiences. So take those skills, take the standardization and the things that Ben just went through, and make it your own to find your own voice, and for the industry that you're going in. That's really puts you for success. And I'll speak for myself. The other people on the line can also please chime in. But I myself have about 10 different resumes based off of, you know, at the time, if I am looking for a new job, what kind of industry and what I'm trying to accomplish, and then tailoring it to positions. So you really, you know, there really is not a place where we are in society for one resume to fit all needs. And so just be conscious of that as you are filling all this out. And really, the next piece, and I want to introduce, is Rabia and Jenya. And why they're on the line is we wanted to give kind of a different perspective of how do you take these services, these skills, and these standardizations. And both Rabia and Jenya have had different paths, so it's, and had different services. And so really want to give examples, almost like a panel of these skills that they acquired and where their path went. Rabia did AmeriCorps and Peace Corps and has government and nonprofit experience. And Jenya did Peace Corps and has private for-profit experience in government as well. And so I just wanted, I have a series of 6 questions I'm going to ask them, and hopefully they'll answer them for us and kind of give their experience to pepper some of this conversation we've been having today. So thank you, Rabia and Jenya. My first question to both of you, and maybe Rabia, you can go first. What was your service and what did you do during that time? So Rabia, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. What I was saying was that, as Brian mentioned, I was lucky enough to be able to do 2 different types of service years, both AmeriCorps and Peace Corps. And when I did Peace Corps, which was my first service, I was an education volunteer in Kyrgyzstan, which ended up actually being a part-time position, about 18 hours per week at school. So then I ended up doing whatever else I wanted. So I actually took on other roles at other nonprofits. I ended up becoming a grant writer at the Central Asian Alliance for Water, becoming a community organizer for a women's group, and a whole host of other things. When I came back from Peace Corps, I realized that I had wanted to understand what service looked like domestically, because I was one of those rare volunteers that went in not because I thought service would help me achieve a certain career path, but because volunteering was the only thing that really excited me growing up and even in college. So I wanted to really understand what service looked like domestically and abroad. And so when I came back, I chose to do AmeriCorps with Hands on Atlanta. And I was what they called a Citizen Action AmeriCorps member. And so we spent half our time at a nonprofit organization in Atlanta that needed capacity building, and then we spent the rest of our time doing direct service with the programs that needed one-off support that Hands on Atlanta worked with.
Great, thank you. And Jenya, the same question. What was your service and what did you do during that time?
Thanks, Brian. So I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Armenia, and I worked for, excuse me, with an NGO that focused on training, women's training, providing technical training, and I worked by writing curriculum, anywhere from teaching proficiency, so Microsoft, Excel, as well as web design. A lot of people were interested with Photoshop. So I taught classes and also wrote curriculum. I also worked with local businesses, and I helped set up and secure the networks, and also held small classes to teach the importance of network security and keeping viruses off your computer. And yeah, during that time, it was just a great opportunity for me to really find my passion for a technical field, and I was able to do that during my Peace Corps service.
Great, thank you. And both of you kind of talked about how this impacted your career, so I'm going to go on to the next question, which is what kind of skills, and we reviewed several in the beginning, but what kind of skills did you feel you walked away most from your experience? And Rabia, so for yours, you might have multiple from both of them, so, but just what are some of the skills that you felt you walked away with? And we'll start with Rabia.
Thanks, Brian. This is a really tough question for me to answer when I first came back, because then nothing like this guide existed, and this would have been really amazing. My positions, you know, as I mentioned earlier, ended up being a variety of things. They weren't what I expected, both in Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, and so what I thought I was going into wasn't what I got. So I had to think a lot about what it was that I ended up doing and what I learned, and so I did a lot of Googling, and like I said, your guide would have been amazing. I think, you know, I got some hard, concrete skills like lesson planning and grant writing and volunteer management, but it was really the 21st century skills that we talked about earlier, right? The ability to take initiative, adapt, grit when you fail, perseverance when you need to shift paths, that I realized I took away and that I tried to actually incorporate into my future positions and in the conversations I had about the jobs I wanted, that I think that have been really useful.
Great, and how about yourself, Jenya?
So, I'll reference 21st century skills as well. I think the biggest one during my Peace Corps career, as well as career afterwards, working in the government sector as well as the private, is initiative and curiosity. I think definitely in Peace Corps, without a lot of initiative, you know, the service may seem stale, and I think the initiative to seek out opportunities where you can give back to the community is what matters most, and at least for my service, and I'm sure a lot of volunteers will feel the same way, is that without the initiative to look for projects and make something happen, you know, the service, that's what makes up the service. And again, curiosity, even in my field, things change very quickly, and without the wanting to learn more, it's very difficult to stay up to date. So anyone that's working in technology in different aspects of it, my cybersecurity, without my curiosity to gain new skills and improve upon what I already know, it will be very difficult to keep up.
Great, thank you. And kind of talking about those skills that you walked away with, all those seem very important. I was smiling to myself because all of them resonated for me in my experience too. Is, you know, how did you translate those skills really into resume experience and interview prompts? Like, how did you weave that into the conversation that you had with future employers? And Rabia, if you'd like to go.
Yeah, so I'm thinking back about the process that I actually undertook, and it sounds like, Ben, you know, you did all this research to figure out how to translate the experiences that Corps members have into, you know, the language that employers use, and I think that was fantastic, and I felt like I did a lot of that. Like, I looked up resumes online and figured out what words people use, what kind of formats, et cetera, and that's what made me realize that what I was doing was actually called community organizing and coalition building. And so it was that kind of stuff that helped me translate some of the hard skills. The soft skills, you know, the 21st century skills that we keep talking about, I realized that I couldn't actually put them on my resume, but that I would have to tell them in my stories, kind of like what Ben said earlier. And so I started actually keeping a list of the stories that helped me learn those softer skills. And I started using those to answer some of the questions, you know, the standard questions you get in interviews, like how do you handle situations of conflict, and what do you do when something that you are trying to work on doesn't happen in the way that you want it to, or that you fail or something. And so a lot of the stories that I had from my Peace Corps experience helped me answer those questions.
Great, and how about yourself, Jenya?
So to translate a lot of the skills, again, in my resume, I didn't specifically state I was curious or I was took initiative. In my bullet points, you know, I have a few projects that I worked on that if I got an interview, I would be able to speak, and then I would say, hey, I showed initiative by doing X, Y, and Z. But actually in the resume, I would say, you know, wrote a grant, and the grant included X amount of people, and it, you know, provided training to, you know, 6 different villages and so on. And definitely in the interview, the ability, especially in technology and tech track, the ability to communicate, it's a very big aspect, and it's very important. In Armenia, you learn how to communicate in a different language, but you still need to communicate when I was training, I had to communicate technical, like HTML programming and web design in Armenian so that the audience understood. And the same thing when you're working in private, also in government, in email communication as well as during meetings, you need to translate a very technical subject matter into words that it's at a high level format, so everyone is able to understand and follow. So I think exhibiting your ability to communicate effectively is a very good skill to have. Great, and that's a kind of a great prompt for you know, the next kind of places like, you know, Rabia, you have experience in government versus nonprofit, and Genya, government for-profit, and I forgot about your Peace Corps nonprofit. How did you see your resume different in all those environments, and can you just speak to maybe some of the differences that you had or that you presented in your resume for those? Rabia, if you want to go.
Sure. Well, Brian, you mentioned that, you know, government resumes are very, very long at times. Sometimes it's a full CV. And so that was my experience in government, that every little thing you'd ever done related to the position was important. So my federal resume ended up being 10, 15 pages long. And I found that in the government resume, I actually wrote more about both the hard skills and soft skills. And focused a lot on the keywords that were in the searches. So sometimes the language that we use around 21st century skills might not be the language that was used in the position descriptions, and so I would, you know, change the keywords because when I last experienced it, government HR focused on keyword searches. When I was transitioning from government to nonprofits, the resume looked a lot more like what Ben showed earlier, and it was the standard 2 to 3 page resume. And I was able to use the more commonly accepted language there. And I felt like I had to take out some of the soft skills because, as I mentioned earlier, I felt like those were easier to convey in the conversations and in the interviews that I had and less on paper.
Great. And how about yourself, Genya? Any differences across your experiences?
Yeah, in my experience, there were 2 major differences. A lot of the government positions want very specific skill sets and also professional certificates. So an example is the CISSP, as well as, like, you know, in network security as well as cybersecurity, they're looking for very specific certifications. And a lot of times that's to meet so there are compliance, so the person who is hired on is compliant with their standards. And where in private, their professional certification is not as important, but education and experience is very important. So a bachelor's degree in the field that you're applying for, as well as ample experience. And for the government sector, I didn't focus too much on the soft skills, and where, you know, at the top, I actually would list tools based on what the the job asked for. So if they ask me to, know a specific ticketing system or know a specific forensics tool, then I will list that because as Rob here just pointed out, it will hit on the keyword search, and my resume will more likely to be picked up and viewed than if I would not to include that.
And can I add one more thing? I thought that was interesting, Jenya, that you felt like you added less soft skills on the government resume, because I felt like I could add more. There was space for it and they asked for it. And so I think that's an interesting distinction between maybe the types of technical positions you applied for versus like program positions that I might have applied for.
Yeah, and that's very applicable. It just because I interviewed a lot of people for my team when I was leading the team, and most of their resumes were very technical, and where they listed like these are the tools they know and this is what they can do, versus how they're able to communicate, and that will actually come out. So if they would get interviewed, all of those soft skills or 21st century skills are applicable during the interview. But on the resume, it was mainly the technical.
Well, great. And for, we're coming to our time. Thank you both for kind of giving your experiences. I think it helps to hear real life experiences. We did have a question from Rachel Robertson about how should she use her AmeriCorps experience in a cover letter. And I feel like would love to hear from if either of you have a comment on that, or Ben, if you have any ways to answer Rachel's question.
This is Ben. I'll take a shot at it quickly. So I said in the chat, and it really was from comments that were made, which were excellent, by the way, that if you can even just take language from the job description and include it in the cover letter. So if the responsibilities are to administer grants, like put the language administered grants in your cover letter, because what you're doing is you're just, again, what I talked to before, you're making matches for the person that's reading that. They're reading lots of cover letters, they're reading lots of resumes. Make a simple, distilled connection between what's in the job description and what you offer. I think, I think have a core narrative, but then make sure you customize around it. If your cover letter, if you have the wrong job title in the cover letter because you're using the same cover letter for 20 different applications, you get thrown out before you ever get a chance. So you really want to take the time to try and customize it. And you're not going to want to necessarily put the elevator pitch for what AmeriCorps is in your cover letter. There's not enough time, there's not enough space. You want to keep that cover letter to one page. But again, if you can make some link, whether it's a mission connection, the organization is about, the organization needs a social media manager, and you ran social medias at AmeriCorps Vista, right? Like, amplifying the voice of missions that I believe in, or core, something like that. You just want to make those connections that are specific and tailored. And I think, I think it's a hard question to answer in the abstract, but I think really taking the time to be as specific as you can, but also, again, you really want to be brief. You want that cover letter to be, 3 paragraphs, 1 page. Don't tell them everything. Tell them a few things to make them excited about giving you a call and setting up a phone screener first interview.
Great. Thank you, Ben, and totally agree with, making sure that you're diligent with cover letters and not just copy and pasting for each instance. Well, I want to thank everybody for their participation today, for coming out and hearing us. To Ben, this is a great tool that everybody will get in the debrief. We did have a question also from Rachel. Will you get these resources? Yes, you will get these resources. They will be out within an hour. I will send the the webinar link, the links to where all these resources are on AmeriCorps alum resources, or where we got them so that you can access them and download them. And we will be sending it out to the full participant list. And here is just kind of your final checklist as we leave this webinar, which is, start with the skills that you've acquired, or if you're a host org, help your core members understand the skills that they will acquire so they can start translating them during their service, and then really use existing resources to translate that experience. Here today, we really spent some time on the tool that Ben has produced with kind of guiding through resume and the standards there. Find your voice, tailor your resume to the industry, and we talked a little bit about that with Robbie and Jenya, and really know the difference and do research there. And the last piece, which Ben highlighted when he was talking over, but I really wanted to highlight before we leave today, which is set up a network of past supervisors, family, friends, to review and give you feedback. It's really always great to have a set of eyes on your resume. It can be another core member at your site, as Ben said. It can be your family member if you trust them, an old professor, teacher, anybody in your network. And this is really kind of setting up your network too. Outside of just resume building, you really want to set up your network so, through LinkedIn or keeping abreast with people so that they can not only help you with your resume and be eyes, but also that might be where your next job comes from. So I want to thank everyone for attending today. Our next session is in October, and each year Service Year Alliance reaches out to host orgs, and a lot of big ones, mainly on the ones that we're hosting on our Service Year Exchange, and we ask them some questions. And in October, we'll be reviewing what the results of that survey was from a macro level. We'll be joined by the Exchange team who's doing that analysis. As always, we update all our Service Year webinar series on the website listed here, and we hope you have a great day. And again, we will be sending out this information as within an hour in today. So thank you for your time today, and we will talk to you later.
Thank you.